Greetings, melting snowflake. I'm glad you tuned in to this is a House of Prozaroff, the melting snowflake melting down again completely. The conservatives are at it again with their brutality. Now, there's some good conservatives, but I'm not picking on those ones. I'm picking on the ones who, they kind of, fighting words, Here's the interesting thing. They hate safe space, right? Like, you shouldn't be able to just run away and find a peaceful place for yourself to relax unless you pay them rent. Can you imagine that? They want to rent out safe space. Well, it sort of is if you're going to college, you're paying a lot of money for tuition. But I never invented safe space, so all these crazy things that the conservatives have come up to criticize safe space. First off, I'm not responsible for the existence of the ideal of safe space. Everybody needs safe space. However, we need only to travel back a little bit in time to find out about our indentured servitude past and the slave master mentality which ran most of America. And America was on a crash course to explode in increasing slavery throughout the country if these men who are driven to gain wealth were not stopped by the North and the abolitionists and people like Abraham Lincoln and Lloyd Garrison, Frederick Douglass, those people who came and inspired to change things. If those guys wouldn't have been there, we would have had a way worse situation than we have now. But it's ingrained into their mindset. And in many cases, of course, you hear on talk show radio probably some of the watered down stuff. They don't like to cuss on there. But then when you start talking to conservatives out in the public, it's not like that. It's more brutal. There's a lot more cuss words they drop. And the same with the street thug, okay? These are really the same people. Some of the conservatives are just as brutal as some of the street thugs, okay? It's like that. And I know there's some messed up liberals too. I can't even consider them liberal. They're rich people masquerading as liberals. And they know nothing about poverty. They don't even know how to deal with poverty. That's why we're in such a big mess with some of these people. $10,000 in student loan forgiveness. We got people with six figures who make $20,000 a year. They have six-figure debt, making 20-some thousand a year. Biden's little loan forgiveness thing does nothing. It's like a blip. It means nothing. It'll pay for some interest that won't matter because they need to make six figures to pay that debt off. It's that simple. So when people don't understand that, and you come up with solutions they don't want to hear because they just hate government and all they want to do is bully people, and safe space really pisses them off because you mean people should have a place to get away from my ranting and raving? Yeah, no one should have to listen to your ranting and raving constantly. And that's what safe space was developed for, right? So you have a place to recharge your batteries, etc. Again, the landed class, the landlords, the property owners, I'm talking about the big guys, the ones that really have a lot of property. They've gotten worse and worse. I mean, many of them have lived off liberalism and the federal government, which gave a lot of these people money, like Fred Trump, for example, got a ton of money to build government housing. And he got loans, cheap loans from these bureaus that you today could not get unless you're already a rich person or you're well established and you don't have about six figures in debt. This is to block and trap people, which is exactly what they're trying to do. So at all points, safe space thing, the problem with the landlords, I was in a court and I saw two cases that day. I was just taking care of some kind of minor traffic thing, and I saw two cases where two folks were fighting, they got into fistfights with their landlords in two cases. This is no accident because the landlord thinks, in many cases, because they have property, they have ownership, they can talk any way they want to the person that rents from them. And when push comes to shove, they can shove and they can speak as nasty as they want. And I'm sure there's some tenants that do that too, that have no respect for their landlord. But we don't know who they are. But we always know that the tenants can do that. We often don't say that the landlord can do that as well. Now, the landlord, of course, is providing a service, their home, to rent, so they have a place to live. But you got to remember, we're human beings. We all do need a place to live. We all don't have the option to move home with mom and dad. Many of us, our mom and dad are dead, okay? We don't have relatives we can go live with. We have to deal with this system. And it's oppressive in many cases. Unless you can get wealth to be able to buy a house and elevate yourself out of poverty, you are stuck with these human relationships which are often bad and lopsided and in one person's favor and in another person's detriment. But, owning property is not easy. You try to be sympathetic to all sides. And the expectations, the utility companies are driving up prices with higher utility costs and such, pushing the owner to have to raise rent. It's not even something they have a choice in. They have no choice. They have to raise rent just to break even. So I understand that, but what I don't understand though is the attack, constant. You got some very wealthy people too who are not in that situation. They have money, they have wealth, and it's just they're pushing their weight around. And things can get ugly. We don't want to talk about that because that's not going to be in media. You're not going to see that on MSNBC. You're not going to see that on Fox. They're not going to talk about the ugly side because nobody wants to see that. Nobody wants to turn on MSNBC and hear that property owners and tenants are fighting. They don't want to hear that. That's not going to, it's just going to turn people off. You're like, oh God, I had to deal with that today. I had an argument with I don't want to watch this. Click, and they're going to go to another station. It's a lot of it's media management. And, but anyhow, safe space is not a bad thing. We all need it. Whether it's labeled safe space or not, we all need space. And of course, people with money always want to act like they're always climbing the Himalaya mountains all the time. They're never getting a break. They're never resting. And yeah and no. But they also see the result of their labor. Many people never see the result of their labor. They worked very hard. They have nothing to really show for it, even though they worked very hard and their labor has been kind of pushed aside as meaningless and underpaid for it. And of course, Mr. Market is never wrong. You can never be underpaid in Mr. Market according to a conservative. You could never be underpaid for years in a market according to a conservative. All those things I disagree with, but has nothing to do with me being a liberal. It actually has to do with logic and mathematics and things that you could prove. So I do appreciate y'all turning in. This is the Melting Snowflake having a meltdown, and House of Pearls are off. Thanks for tuning in. Subscribe to my channel. Thank you.